This is the Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 13th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to Jesus, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the day comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ.
I'd like to introduce again Pastor Nick Schillack. He's been here. This is the third time?
It is. This was the second church I ever visited for Samaritas, which was June of 2015. The next time I was here was the Sunday after the presidential election, so I saved you from having to say anything.
Yeah.
And then this time was, and so I'm actually going to be moving into a new call, and so this will actually be the last congregation I'm visiting for Samaritas.
So it's sort of cool. This was the second church that he came to when he took this position, and now he's leaving the position, and it's the last church that he's visiting before he takes a new call.
Leaving in all good ways. Samaritas has been incredible.
Yeah, so we wish you well in your new call.
Thank you.
We're going to discuss today we're going to connect the biblical text, the biblical readings that we had, to the work of Samaritas. So I'm going to ask Pastor Nick some questions. In today's gospel reading, which involves the Pharisees surprisingly coming to warn Jesus about a threat on his life by Herod, and believe me, that's a huge surprise because we usually don't hear the Pharisees doing that. We hear Jesus acknowledge that his earthly journey was soon coming to an end in Jerusalem. However, amidst his somewhat difficult words, he shared in gentle words the loving heart of God. He said, "How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings." Part of our work in the church is to help gather people and draw them closer to our loving God. Nick, could you share with us the history of Samaritas' ministry, how it started very simply, and how it has, over its 85 years, gathered thousands of people behind the mission of serving people as an expression of the love of Christ?
Yeah, so we are in our 85th year as an organization. But I'll start by taking you back 100 years. In 1919, there was a Lutheran pastor in Ohio who got in his car with his wife and 2 daughters. The story's told that they put their chicken coop on top. I'm not sure because they don't feel good for the chickens, if that's true. And they drove to Michigan to do ministry. And the pastor's name, and I promise I'm not making this up because it sounds too German Lutheran to be true, Martin Luther Frederick. I promise that's a real name. And so they drove from Ohio to Detroit to begin bringing together congregations around a common mission. Why did they go to Detroit in 1919? It's because Detroit was one of the wealthiest, fastest growing cities on the planet. Detroit is where all the money was and where it was coming from. It's important to remember that because they went there to do mission work, not because of the stereotypes we think of about Detroit, which is rebounding amazingly right now, but because it was wealthy. It's during times of great abundance that people are forgotten the easiest. That's the time when people are most forgotten When we're all kind of hurting, we know what it means to reach out and support one another. And that's actually a good instruction for today, because right now, despite the high volatility of the stock market, things are pretty high with the stock market. Despite people still being underemployed, there is a low unemployment rate. Now is the similar time when people are forgotten the most. So they came to Detroit, started gathering together congregations, and then in 1934 organized as the Lutheran Charities. Samaritas, by the way, was not the first time we renamed ourselves. So it was the Luther Intermission League. How's that for a mouthful? That adds like 4 or 5 minutes to a sermon alone, if I had to keep saying that. And then the Lutheran Charities in 1934, when we completed our first adoption. And now we, and I'm including you because this is a ministry of our church, we are the largest private foster and adoption agency in the entire state of Michigan. That's us. We completed about 400 and some adoptions last year, serve around 1,500 to 1,600 foster children at any given time. Then we got to World War II. And after World War II, 1/4 of all Lutherans in the world were refugees. That was 1/4 of us. Just take 1/4 of this room. That's 1/4 of us, just 70 some years ago. We were they were us. Those are members of my family. Those are maybe pastors that have served here or served you in other places. And so now, after that's, we officially then partnered with the federal government in 1949, even though we started the work earlier. Now we are the largest refugee resettlement agency in the entire state of Michigan and 4th largest in the nation. That's the work that we are all doing with one another. And as you know, connecting with the house next door here, the children that we work with who are in refugee foster care, we're one of only 2 agencies in Michigan and a couple dozen in the entire nation that can do that type of work. That's what we get to do. That's what you get to do right here on the ground. We eventually renamed ourselves Lutheran Social Services of Michigan, because again, Lutheran Charities, I guess, was too short to say. And so, but as we probably all heard it, LSSM, if we grew up in the Lutheran Church. And then we began helping seniors and founding senior living communities. But we know that not everybody can afford to retire in a senior living community, so we began opening affordable living communities, partnering with HUD. And so we have 15 of those communities across the state, and we have a vision of trying to double that because we want to serve people. When you go into these places, the affordable living communities, it's hard to notice that they're subsidized. There's fireplaces and raised bed gardens and libraries and community activities. We all believe that if we're serving people as an expression of the love of Christ, that means helping people retire with dignity and honor, even on a low fixed income. It's possible. So we opened Community Center in Saginaw. We help women coming out of prison or out of any type of incarceration at our Heartline Ministry in Detroit. And most recently, we've begun helping survivors of human trafficking through that ministry. We help homeless families in Westland. And where most homeless centers separate men and women for security reasons, which means the kids are almost never with their dad, we have 24 rooms where families stay together. And because of that, because of the way that we work with them, and we believe in the power of the resurrection, and that it's not just a carrot on a stick for the next life, it's also about the power of the resurrection right here and now, 71% of the families that came through there last year went on to permanent housing. Not another shelter, not a car, not somebody else's couch. 71% went on to permanent housing. But that's not enough for us. So we're partnering with, this is on the old Eloise State Hospital campus in Westland. And so we're partnering with somebody to expand that work and do even more. We help people with home health care in different parts of the state. It's not quite here yet, but we have ideas about bringing it to Lansing. We have homes for persons with disabilities, and we bring services to them at home as well. All sorts of work that we do like this allows us to serve 16,000 people a year as an expression of the love of Christ. And it started with a pastor getting in his car with his wife and 2 daughters, and for some unfortunate chickens that they threw on top as they made the drive. Yeah.
That's a fabulous story. God's love at work through people.
Absolutely. And gathering those people, I mean, I love those such loving motherly words,
Yes.
As a hen gathers her chicks.
And that longing that Jesus spoke is happening through Samaritas.
Exactly.
Relating to how Samaritas has helped many people experience God's love over many years, could you please share a Samaritas success story about someone in your program who was blessed by the work we share?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, I thought about sharing a story about a couple kids that were in a refugee foster program, but I know that you know a lot about that because of the work you do here. So this is a little different. It's about a girl, we call her Rebecca, and she was one of the up to 60 foster kids that we send over to Stony Lake Lutheran Camp every year. And we send these foster kids to have not just one of the best weeks of the summer, but for some of them, one of the best weeks of their lives. And so Rebecca got to camp, but couldn't fall asleep the first night because she didn't have her comfort noise. Does anybody else here do you have a noise you need to hear when you fall asleep? Just shout out, what is your noise? TV? Fan? What was that? Fan? Some people like radio, even a white noise machine to kind of try to cancel it out. I'm one of those. I'm one of those television people, which sadly for my wife means she married somebody who needs a television. I always feel bad for her about that because it's loud sometimes. What was Rebecca's comfort noise? What did she grow up hearing that told her it's time to fall asleep? It's the sound of violence. It's the sound of people hurting each other with their words and with their actions. What does it do for a child when that is the thing that says it's time to go to sleep? So here's Rebecca in a cabin, by the way, that's unlocked, and she grew up in a house with locks all over, not to protect you from the people outside, but to protect her from the people inside her house. And here she is in a cabin, hearing the leaves rustle up above, coming from the breeze from Lake Michigan less than a mile away, the kind of thing that many of us plan a year and a small fortune to experience for a few days. Wasn't easy for her. But she eventually fell asleep-ish. The next night, it got better. The night after that, she told us she had the best sleep in her entire life. By the end of this week, she knew that life could be better. She knew that the pain she had experienced didn't have the final answer, didn't have the final say. And isn't that really what our work is all about as Christians? Death is real, pain is real, sin is real, brokenness is real, but it no longer has the final say. Life wins. Hope and love win. And they won for her. And so when she left there that week, she knew that she has a God who loves her. Because people like us gather together these $550 scholarships to send her to camp, no strings attached. People like us who will probably never meet her this side of heaven sent her unconditionally, no strings attached, because we have a God who loves us, no strings attached. And now Rebecca knows she has a God who loves her, no strings attached. And she knows that if she's moving all around throughout the state as she goes into adulthood, if she comes to Okemos, there's this place called Faith Lutheran. If she goes to Traverse City, there's this place called Bethlehem Lutheran. If she goes over to Detroit, there's this place called Christ Church Detroit. She knows about all of these congregations because they're people who sent her to camp, no strings attached. And the amazing thing is, that's her own story. It's her unique story. We serve 16,000 people a year as an expression of the love of Christ. What's the church doing to make a difference? There's one story right there, but there's 16,000 of them every year.
Those words.
Oh, I didn't want to make you cry.
You know, those words, God's living into, we live into those words as the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And God works through the body of Christ to gather the children as a hen gathers her brood.
And I can't even, and when I think of her story, I mean, it's that loving motherly embrace. Yeah.
A final question.
Yes.
What are some specific ways that the people of this congregation can partner with Samaritas to help fill any gaps so that there can be more success stories?
It almost feels like a softball being here because you're all doing so much. The most important thing that you can do, and I'm guessing you're already doing it, is prayer. Prayer fuels the ministry. We do not do easy work. You may have heard in the news that people aren't necessarily fans of some of the stuff we do. I know you have. And really, part of the reason is because we're trying to live out the gospel. We got verbally attacked. We get threatened from all different sides of the political spectrum. This is not a matter of being attacked from people on the right or on the left. Sometimes we offend everybody because we're on the extremes, both extremes at the same time, because we're serving people as an expression of the love of Christ. If we're living out the gospel, that's not always the most popular thing to do. The color for Samaritas that we chose is purple. We didn't just choose that because it gives us this really cool stuff to give to bishops to make them happy because they always wear purple. We chose it because we're one of the few places left where people of red politics and blue politics can come together behind a common mission. And what that means is sometimes both extremes are going to be offended when that huge middle swath of people are just ready to say, how do we serve people as an expression of the love of Christ? So we need your prayers. Prayers fuel the ministry. Prayers, it's just, you know what it is. It's just lifeblood. I mentioned that we do those scholarships. I bring that up because it is something different than the big focus right now with refugee foster children here. They're $550 scholarships. Maybe you have a group that wants to get together and sponsor one. Maybe you want to sponsor one. There's envelopes that you receive coming in. I think about our gifts like this. It's like snowflakes. Sometimes a snowflake lands in our hand even when it's winter, and it'll just melt. But we've seen a few weeks ago, when all those snowflakes come together, some pretty amazing things happen. That's like our gifts. We sometimes underestimate our gifts as Christians, but Christian generosity is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. When we come together behind a common mission, we can do so much. And the last thing I would say is learn. Read about what we're doing. Learn about ways to plug in. Learn about ways to connect. And simply just know the facts. Just know the facts. Because we are in a world of so much misinformation and disinformation. We need to know the facts. It used to be that we were in a world where we have to search for an answer. Now there's so many answers out there, and we have to figure out how to filter out the junk and find out what the truth is. So learn and read and share what you learn.
Thank you, Pastor Nick.
Thank you.
Again, those words, Jesus said, "How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings." I think for those of us in this work, our bones burn with that question, and we live into it all the time.